Ambulance sirens tore through the thick East Coast rain, bringing the sickening stench of charred flesh and deep humiliation. On the stretcher lay my husband, a golden real estate heir, and his sister-in-law. They were badly burned, naked, and locked together by figure-8 steel handcuffs welded to a blackened bed frame. Panicked staff rushed past shrieking machines, but my pulse never spiked. Meeting his agonized, terrified eyes, I calmly pulled the curtain closed and smiled. Hello and welcome back to Violet Revenge Stories. Sadly, YouTube has demonetized our channel, leaving us without a budget to keep operating. If you enjoy today's story, please consider supporting us with just $1 to help pay our staff so they can afford their living expenses and continue creating more stories for you. You can support us by scanning the QR code on your screen or by clicking the donation link in the description or the pinned comment below. My name is Claire Robinson. I am the head charge nurse at Cresthaven Medical Center, a fortress of glass and steel designed exclusively to heal the bodies and hide the secrets of the absolute elite. Tonight, a Category 3 hurricane is battering the East Coast. Rain lashes against the reinforced windows of the emergency department like handfuls of gravel, but the chaos outside is nothing compared to the storm about to breach our doors. The red trauma alarms blare over the intercom system, cutting through the sterile silence of the night shift. Dispatch reports 2 priority patients incoming. They were pulled from a flash fire at a highly secure, automated smart cabin hidden deep in the sprawling pine forest 50 miles north of the city. When the automated double doors finally crash open, the smell hits me before the stretchers even cross the threshold. It is the heavy, sickening odor of scorched synthetic fabric, roasted flesh, and the sharp tang of melted electrical wiring. Paramedics rush in, pushing 2 stretchers that are awkwardly locked together. The situation is as physically grotesque as it is morally pathetic. On the left stretcher lies Ethan, my wealthy, charming husband. On the right is Vanessa, his brother's brilliant, untouchable wife. They are both shivering violently, coated in toxic black soot, their skin aggressively blistering across their shoulders, necks, and chests. They are half naked. What little remains of their torn, soaked designer clothing clings pathetically to their ruined skin. But the absolute masterpiece of this wretched tableau is their wrists. They are bound together by a pair of heavy-duty, figure-8 steel handcuffs. The metal has partially fused to a warped, blackened chunk of a luxury bed frame that the firefighters had to cut away just to transport them. Total panic erupts in the trauma room. Junior nurses gasp. The attending physician barks rapid-fire questions at the paramedics. Machines shriek a high-pitched warning as both patients' heart rates skyrocket. Amidst the screaming monitors and the blood, my hands do not shake. My heart rate does not climb a single beat. I do not scream or break down into the crying, hysterical wife they would expect. I step directly to the head of the trauma bay, my spine straight, and take absolute command of the room. Push 4 milligrams of morphine IV, right now, I order a terrified resident, my voice slicing through the noise with freezing precision. Get a secondary line on the right arm, prepare for rapid fluid resuscitation, and open 3 burn dressing kits. I work with brutal, mechanical efficiency. I slide the intravenous needle into Ethan's one unburnt forearm vein. My face is an impenetrable mask of clinical indifference. I press my gloved fingers against his pulse point. I am touching the man I vowed to spend my life with, but I feel absolutely nothing. In this harshly lit room, under the blinding surgical lights, they are no longer family. They are merely pathetic, ruined biological specimens laid out on my metal table. Ethan is hacking up thick black soot. His chest heaves uncontrollably. Through the haze of severe smoke inhalation and blinding, searing pain, his bloodshot eyes dart around the room and finally land on my face. A beat of confusion passes, followed instantly by a tidal wave of pure, unfiltered terror. He reaches up and grabs my wrist with his free, trembling hand, leaving a smear of ash on my pristine blue glove. "Claire," he gasps out, his voice a raspy, pathetic wheeze. "Claire,
I am so sorry. Am I dying? Please, do not let me die.
I do not offer him a single word of comfort. I simply pry his dirty fingers off my sterile glove, one by one, with firm detachment. Then, I shift my gaze to Vanessa. Her normally immaculate, surgically perfected face is swollen, smeared with ash, and streaked with tears of agony. When her eyes meet mine, she lets out a muffled, strangled sob. She violently turns her head away, burying her face into the thin hospital pillow, trying desperately to hide her ruined beauty and her utter degradation from my view. Once the trauma team stabilizes their vitals and wheels their pathetic, handcuffed bodies toward the intensive burn unit, the heavy scent of their betrayal lingers in the freezing air. I walk calmly back to the central nurses' station and pull up the electronic medical chart. My fingers fly across the keyboard. I type out a flawlessly detailed, strictly objective clinical report of their exact physical state upon arrival. I ensure that every single humiliating detail regarding the steel handcuffs, the cut bed frame, and their explicit state of undress is permanently logged into the secure, encrypted hospital database. When I reach the bottom of the screen, I authorize the document with my digital signature. I stare at the glowing blue monitor, alone in the quiet hum of the emergency room, and allow a small, razor-sharp smile to finally touch my lips. This authorized medical chart is the very first piece of undeniable, indestructible physical evidence of their absolute filth, and no amount of Robinson family money or political power in this world will ever be able to erase it. Washing the toxic soot off my hands in the sterile staff restroom, I watch the dark water spiral down the stainless steel drain. It is a fitting visual for the total collapse of the Robinson family empire. Standing under the harsh fluorescent lights, I look at my reflection in the mirror. I am not a victim. I never was. I did not marry into this dynasty for their trust funds, their private jets, or their sprawling summer estates. I am a remarkably pragmatic woman, raised by a single mother who worked grueling 12-hour shifts just to keep the heat on. I paid off $90,000 in student loans by working consecutive double shifts at the hospital. I built my own life from the ground up. When I married Ethan 5 years ago, I truly believed he was the one anomaly in his toxic bloodline. Back then, he played the part of the rebellious son with absolute perfection. He drove a modest car, mocked the country club elite, and swore he wanted nothing to do with his family's suffocating wealth. I fell in love with a man who promised me a quiet, honest life, but I should have known that nobody simply walks away from the gravitational pull of Arthur Robinson. Arthur is my father-in-law, a ruthless real estate titan who is currently pouring tens of millions of dollars into a highly aggressive campaign for mayor. For Arthur, the concept of family is merely a marketing tool. He operates on a strict platform of traditional moral values, demanding a flawless, picture-perfect portrait from his children to feed to the ravenous press. Every Sunday evening, attendance at his massive, violently opulent estate is mandatory. Those dinners never feel like family gatherings. They feel like highly orchestrated press conferences where every smile is calculated and every word is a strategic political maneuver. At the very center of Arthur's grand fake portrait stands Vanessa. She is married to Marcus, who is Ethan's older brother. Vanessa is not just a sharp corporate strategist. She is the undisputed golden daughter-in-law. She is the brilliant, cutthroat architect running every single aspect of Arthur's mayoral campaign. She manages the donors, controls the narrative, and wields more power in the family business than anyone else. In stark contrast, her husband Marcus is openly treated with quiet, agonizing disdain. Marcus rebelled in a way that actually stuck. He became a fiercely independent investigative journalist, chasing political corruption and corporate fraud, because he refused to kiss the corporate ring and join the real estate empire. Arthur labeled him the family failure. Marcus sits at the dinner table like a ghost, completely marginalized, while his wife basks in the blinding glow of his father's approval. The perfect facade began to crack for me about 8 months ago. The shift was gradual, then suddenly undeniable. The rebellious, grounded Ethan I married started to change. The expensive watches he once mocked suddenly appeared on his wrist. Then came the mysterious business trips. He claimed he was overseeing vital property acquisitions in neighboring states, leaving me alone for 2 or 3 weekends a month. He would pack a single designer suitcase and kiss my forehead, promising he would be back by Sunday afternoon. I wanted to trust him, but my clinical training taught me to always look for the underlying symptoms of a disease. The signs of their sickness were microscopic at first. The most glaring symptom was the shifting dynamic at our mandatory Sunday dinners. Vanessa started arriving 45 minutes to an hour late on a regular basis. She would sweep into the grand dining room with an impeccable, breathless excuse already prepared. "I am so sorry I am late. Arthur, the campaign never sleeps, and we had a crisis with a major donor on the West Coast," she would announce, her voice dripping with fake exhaustion. Arthur would instantly forgive her, pouring her a glass of wine that cost over $2,000 a bottle. But it was not her lies that betrayed her. It was her scent. Vanessa always wore an incredibly distinct, custom-blended Parisian perfume. It was an aggressive, intoxicating fragrance with heavy notes of dark amber, crushed velvet, and bitter orange. It was a scent that demanded attention. One cold Tuesday morning, while picking up Ethan's custom-tailored wool suit from the dry cleaning pile after one of his weekend trips, the truth hit me with the force of a physical blow. As I held the lapel, I caught it, the exact same heavy, undeniable scent of dark amber and bitter orange was permanently woven into the fibers of my husband's jacket. It was not a passing transfer from a hug. It was the deep, lingering scent of prolonged, intimate contact. I did not scream. I did not throw the jacket across the room. I simply stood in the absolute silence of my bedroom, inhaling the putrid reality of my marriage. The following Sunday, I sat at the long mahogany dining table. I listened to Arthur booming about the importance of family values to a local reporter he had invited over. I watched Ethan and Vanessa exchange a glance so brief, so casually intimate, that it made my stomach turn. Then, I looked across the table at Marcus. He was pushing his food around his porcelain plate, his sharp, journalistic eyes quietly observing the exact same subtle, sickening interactions I was seeing. He looked up, and our eyes locked. In that one silent, heavy moment, a devastating realization passed between us. We were the outsiders. We were the decoys. Marcus and I were the socially acceptable, sturdy props they needed to maintain their flawless moral facade. We were the blind, boring spouses designed to keep their disgusting, arrogant secrets safely hidden from the world. We were their perfect little alibis. It was a suffocatingly quiet Saturday night in late October when the final pieces of the puzzle violently snapped together. Ethan had kissed my cheek that morning, claiming he had an emergency zoning board meeting 3 states away. Vanessa, predictably, was supposedly managing a high-stakes donor retreat. I sat alone in my aggressively modern living room, listening to the heavy rain hitting the glass, and decided I was done playing the fool. I picked up my phone and dialed Marcus. He answered on the second ring. The background on his end was dead silent. I asked him to come over, and within 45 minutes, he was sitting on my leather sofa. We did not offer each other polite greetings. We did not cry. We simply laid our ugly truths on the polished oak coffee table. "Her custom perfume is baked into his suit jackets," I told him, keeping my voice entirely flat. Marcus leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I found a parking garage receipt hidden under the passenger seat of her car," he replied, his tone equally devoid of emotion. It was time-stamped for a Friday night in a city she swore she was nowhere near, the same city Ethan was supposedly visiting for a site inspection. Any ordinary betrayed spouses might have hired a private investigator to capture grainy photos of a motel room rendezvous. They might have planned a dramatic confrontation, but Marcus is a seasoned investigative journalist trained to dismantle corrupt political machines. And I am a woman who manages the absolute chaos of a trauma center with mathematical precision. We did not want a messy, emotional fight. We wanted undeniable leverage. So, we turned my dining room into a war room. For the next 6 hours, we combined our distinct skill sets. Marcus opened his heavily encrypted laptop. Out of pure journalistic curiosity, he had already been quietly scraping the publicly available financial disclosure forms from Arthur's mayoral campaign. He showed me the spreadsheets. His sharp eyes had caught several glaring inconsistencies. Massive, vague expenditures were being funneled out of the campaign's war chest under the guise of media consulting fees and digital marketing analytics. Arthur is ruthless, but he is not stupid, Marcus explained, pointing to a series of recurring transactions. He micromanages every single dollar. The only person who has the unchecked authority to approve these blind invoices without his direct signature is his campaign manager,
Vanessa.
But Vanessa could not simply wire millions of dollars directly into her own bank account without triggering an immediate federal audit. She needed a ghost vendor. She needed a partner. That was my cue to step in. Ethan always underestimated my grasp on the digital infrastructure of our lives. Because I set up the automated smart home network, I had absolute administrative access to the central router. I opened my laptop and pulled the historical network logs. I bypassed the standard devices and looked for unrecognized hardware. It took me 20 minutes to isolate a hidden media access control address that only connected to our home network late at night when Ethan claimed he was working in his study. Using a simple packet sniffer software I downloaded, I managed to pull a cached, unencrypted email header from that specific device's history. It was a registration confirmation for an offshore domain registry. Armed with that single breadcrumb, Marcus used his deep web search tools to bypass the privacy guards. We tracked the domain to a newly registered shell company called Horizon Strategic Solutions. When Marcus cross-referenced that exact company name against Arthur's campaign expenditure reports, the room went entirely cold. Horizon Strategic Solutions was the ghost vendor. Vanessa was authorizing payments of $50,000, sometimes $80,000 a week, straight into this shell company, and the registered agent for Horizon, hiding behind 3 layers of fake corporate proxies, was a man using a heavily modified version of Ethan's middle name and his deceased mother's maiden name. The sickening truth materialized on the screen in front of us. This was not a tragic, passionate affair between 2 lonely people. This was a highly calculated, multi-million-dollar corporate heist. They were quietly bleeding Arthur's political campaign dry. We dug deeper into the shell company's financial routing and uncovered the final, devastating twist. They were not planning to stick around. Marcus uncovered wire transfers moving the stolen funds from Horizon into untraceable offshore accounts located in a jurisdiction completely shielded from United States extradition laws. Alongside the accounts, there were digital receipts for 2 one-way, first-class plane tickets scheduled for departure the day after the mayoral election. They were going to drain the empire, vanish into the Caribbean, and leave the entire catastrophic mess behind. When the federal investigators and the Internal Revenue Service inevitably descended upon the bankrupt campaign, Arthur would take the political fall. But the legal and financial ruin would crush the remaining family members. They were actively setting up Marcus and me to be collateral damage in their grand escape. "We cannot say a single word," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper as he stared at the offshore account balances totaling nearly $5 million. "If we confront them now, they will panic, destroy the servers, and claim they were hacked. We will look like paranoid, jealous spouses." "We need the physical anchor," I agreed, my mind already calculating the next move. "Where do they go?" "They are not risking cheap hotels anymore. They have too much stolen cash." I went back to the shell company's digital footprint. If they had money to burn, they bought property. I scanned the automated recurring payments tied to the fake corporate credit card we had uncovered. Mixed in with server hosting fees was a monthly payment to an ultra-exclusive rural broadband provider. I pulled the billing address. It was not a commercial building. It was a secluded land parcel located 50 miles north, deep in the dense pine forests. We pulled up the satellite imagery. Hidden perfectly beneath the heavy tree canopy was a newly constructed, state-of-the-art, automated smart cabin. It was a fortress of reinforced glass, steel, and high-end security systems, completely isolated from the outside world. It was their secret sanctuary, their untouchable love nest built on stolen money. Sitting in the glow of the laptop screens at 3 o'clock in the morning, Marcus and I made a silent pact. We quietly downloaded every single ledger, every email header, and every routing number onto 2 separate encrypted hard drives. We were not going to scream. We were going to build an airtight cage, wait for them to walk inside, and lock the door forever. We were not murderers. I spent my entire adult life taking clinical oaths to preserve human life, and Marcus built his reputation on exposing corruption through legal, journalistic channels. Our ultimate goal was never physical harm. It was total, absolute social and financial annihilation. We wanted to strip them of their power, their stolen millions, and their pristine reputations. The plan was terrifyingly simple. We were going to use their own $1 million smart cabin against them, transforming their luxurious secret hideaway into a digital holding cell. 2 weeks before the storm hit, Marcus and I drove out to those dense northern woods. While the cabin was empty, he bypassed the exterior security panel. We did not break windows or damage physical property. Instead, Marcus quietly slipped 3 high-definition micro-cameras into the living room and the master bedroom. More importantly, he infected the central processing hub of the house with a custom malicious software. It gave him total remote administrative control over every single electronic function in that building. The climate control, the reinforced hurricane shutters, the biometric locks on the tempered glass doors, all of it belonged to us. That brings us to tonight, the night the massive Category 3 hurricane finally made landfall. I was sitting in my private office at the hospital, drinking bitter coffee and mentally preparing for my overnight shift. With my phone sitting on the desk, Marcus was stationed in his dark apartment across the city, monitoring the live video feeds. At exactly 9 o'clock in the evening, my phone lit up with a text message from him. They had arrived. Despite the horrific weather warnings, their arrogance convinced them they were untouchable. They wanted one last weekend of twisted celebration before they stole the campaign funds and vanished. I put in my wireless earpiece and called Marcus. His voice was laced with a thick layer of disgust. "They are in the bedroom," he told me. "And Claire, it is pathetic." Ethan and Vanessa were celebrating their incoming wealth with a sick, degrading power game. Marcus described how Ethan pulled out a pair of heavy-duty figure-8 steel handcuffs. They willingly stripped off their designer clothes and shackled themselves to the custom metal frame of the bed. Giggling like spoiled children, they locked themselves up, completely voluntarily, discarding the key on a dresser entirely out of their reach. "Do it," I whispered into the phone, staring blankly at the sterile white wall of my office. Marcus hit the execution command on his keyboard, 50 miles away. The smart cabin responded instantly. The heavy steel deadbolts on the front and back doors violently slid into place with a loud mechanical thud. The hurricane shutters dropped down over the reinforced glass windows, sealing the perimeter. The digital thermostats locked. They were completely trapped inside a fortress designed to withstand a natural disaster. Our plan was to simply call the county sheriff, report an anonymous tip about armed trespassers, and let the police violently breach the doors to find the 2 golden heirs of the Robinson Empire naked, handcuffed, and surrounded by printed documents of their corporate fraud. But the universe has a highly twisted sense of humor, and karma is vastly more creative than I could ever be. As Marcus reached for his second phone to dial 911, the hurricane delivered an unexpected judgment. A massive, deafening lightning bolt struck the main electrical transformer buried just outside the property line. The catastrophic power surge bypassed the cabin's primary surge protectors and shot directly into the smart floor heating system located right under the master bed. "Claire, something is wrong," Marcus yelled into my ear, panic bleeding into his voice for the first time. "The floorboards are sparking. The rug is catching fire." I gripped the edge of my desk. Through his description, I pictured the horrific scene unfolding. A thick, toxic plume of black smoke erupted from the synthetic rug beneath them. The flames rapidly latched onto the heavy velvet curtains and the wooden nightstands. Ethan and Vanessa realized they were trapped. They screamed, yanking violently against the steel handcuffs. But the metal only dug deeper into their flesh. They were chained to a heavy frame they could not move. Because the system was completely fried by the lightning strike, the doors remained permanently locked. The thick, tempered glass would not break. The room rapidly filled with blinding, suffocating smoke. The extreme heat began to melt the synthetic fibers of their remaining clothing directly onto their skin. The hidden cameras began to melt, the feed severely distorting into horrifying, flashing images of their desperate, agonizing struggle against the unforgiving metal. Just as the fire reached the edge of the mattress, threatening to burn them completely alive, the localized backup generator finally kicked in. It was a delayed reaction, but it provided just enough power to activate the emergency overhead fire suppression sprinklers. Gallons of chemical retardant and freezing water flooded the room, violently suffocating the flames. The live video feed completely shorted out, leaving Marcus staring at a dead black screen. They did not die, but they were severely roasted, choking on toxic air, and still permanently chained to the ruined bed. Marcus immediately called the emergency dispatch, reporting a massive structural fire. I hung up the phone and walked out of my office, stepping into the glaring lights of the central nurses' station just as the red trauma alarms began to shriek. The dispatch radio crackled to life, announcing 2 priority burn victims incoming from a heavily wooded coordinate exactly 50 miles north. Standing there listening to the panicked voice of the paramedic, my pulse steadied. We had planned to destroy their reputations, but the storm had decided to brand their betrayal directly onto their flesh. Karma had acted as the absolute judge and executioner, delivering a sentence far more agonizing than any prison cell could ever provide. By 7 o'clock the next morning, the brutal storm had finally broken, but the true hurricane was just tearing through the polished doors of the VIP recovery wing. Arthur Robinson did not come to the hospital as a concerned father. He arrived like a mafia boss walking into a crime scene, flanked by a phalanx of 3 aggressively dressed corporate lawyers carrying expensive leather briefcases. I stood quietly near the nurses' station, watching Arthur corner the hospital director against a frosted glass wall. Arthur jabbed a thick, manicured finger into the director's chest, his voice a low, terrifying growl. He threatened to bankrupt the entire medical facility with endless litigation if a single word about the steel handcuffs, the lack of clothing, or the deeply humiliating nature of his children's burns ever reached the local press. To Arthur, severe bodily injury was a minor inconvenience, but a public stain on his mayoral campaign was an absolute tragedy. After securing his threats with the administration, Arthur turned his cold, calculating gaze onto me. He signaled for his lawyers to wait outside and aggressively motioned for me to follow him into the sprawling, double-occupancy VIP suite, where the hospital had mercifully, or perhaps cruelly, placed both Ethan and Vanessa for their specialized burn recovery. The room smelled heavily of sterile gauze, scorched hair, and high-grade antibiotic ointment. Ethan and Vanessa lay in separate mechanized beds, wrapped tightly in thick white bandages, resembling pathetic, broken mummies. Arthur did not ask about their pain levels. He did not shed a single tear for his family. He simply reached into the breast pocket of his tailored suit, pulled out a pristine checkbook, and slammed a heavy gold-plated pen onto the rolling medical table next to me. "I am writing you a cashier's check for $2 million, Arthur stated, his tone completely devoid of human empathy. "My legal team is drafting the divorce papers right now. You will sign a total non-disclosure agreement. If the press asks, you and Ethan simply grew apart. In fact, you will imply to the media that your demanding hospital shifts neglected his basic needs, creating a highly stressful environment that forced my son to seek temporary, meaningless relief elsewhere. You take the blame, you take the money, and you walk away quietly." I looked down at the blank check. A few years ago, his sheer authority might have intimidated me. Today, his words were just pathetic, hollow noise. Before I could even issue my polite decline, a raspy, desperate voice echoed from the far corner of the room. "Arthur, you have to listen to me." Vanessa wheezed from behind her thick facial bandages. Her usually commanding, arrogant voice was now a fragile, high-pitched whine. She shifted her heavily wrapped body, immediately attempting to secure the moral high ground. "I did not want any of this. Ethan tricked me. He told me we were meeting a major campaign donor at the cabin. When I arrived, he locked the doors. He threatened to manufacture fake scandals to destroy my career if I did not play his sick games. I am a victim here. He forced me." The sheer audacity of her lie hung in the sterile air for exactly 2 seconds before Ethan violently erupted. "You lying, manipulative parasite," Ethan screamed, thrashing against his hospital bed restraints. His heart rate monitor instantly shrieked a rapid, high-pitched warning. His face was twisted in a mixture of physical agony and absolute rage. "It was your idea. Vanessa, you booked the cabin, you bought those disgusting cuffs. Do not listen to her. Dad, she is trying to ruin me." Ethan turned his desperate, bloodshot eyes toward Arthur, completely abandoning his supposed lover without a second of hesitation. "She seduces everyone. Do not freeze my shares in the company. Dad, please, I will do whatever you want. I will go to rehab. I will do a public apology. Just do not cut me off from the family trust." I stood perfectly still in the center of the massive room, crossing my arms over my chest, and simply watched them. It was the most magnificent piece of dark social satire I had ever witnessed. Just 24 hours ago, these were the untouchable elites of the city. They wore clothes that cost more than my annual salary. They looked down on the working class from their penthouse balconies, constantly preaching about traditional morality, family values, and superior intellect. Yet, the absolute second their trust funds and social standings were genuinely threatened, their elegant masks dissolved entirely. They instantly turned into feral, starving rats trapped in a sinking barrel, viciously tearing at each other's throats just to keep their own heads above the water. There was no loyalty, no love, and certainly no honor between thieves, just raw, pathetic greed. Arthur looked at his 2 children with profound disgust, his face turning an unhealthy shade of crimson as the stress of his collapsing dynasty physically hit him. At that exact moment, the heavy wooden door of the VIP suite glided open. The arguing abruptly ceased. All 4 of us turned to look. Marcus stepped into the room. He was wearing a sharp, dark trench coat, bringing the crisp, cold air of the morning inside with him. He looked entirely relaxed, possessing the calm, dangerous aura of a man who held all the winning cards in a high-stakes game. In his right hand, he casually gripped a thick, heavily packed manila folder. He stepped past me, his shoulder gently brushing mine in a silent show of absolute solidarity. He stopped at the foot of Ethan's bed, looked directly into Arthur's furious eyes, and offered a perfectly polite, chilling smile. "Good morning, Father," Marcus said, his voice smooth and steady. "I hope I am not interrupting a private family meeting, because we have a tremendous amount of financial business to discuss." Arthur's face twisted into a mask of pure, unfiltered fury at the sight of his eldest son. "Get out of this room immediately! Marcus!" Arthur roared, his voice shaking the glass partitions. "This is a private family crisis, and it has absolutely nothing to do with you." Marcus did not flinch. He walked calmly to the side of Ethan's bed and casually tossed the thick manila folder onto the white sheets. The heavy stack of papers spilled open, revealing meticulously highlighted banking ledgers and offshore routing numbers. "I am afraid it has everything to do with me, Father," Marcus replied smoothly. "And very soon, it is going to have everything to do with the Federal Bureau of Investigation." Arthur stepped forward, glaring at the documents. "What is this nonsense?" "Those are the certified wire transfer logs from your mayoral campaign war chest," Marcus explained, his tone conversational, as if he were discussing the weather. "It details exactly how your golden son and your brilliant campaign manager quietly embezzled $5 million through a dummy corporation. They were not just sharing a bed. Arthur, They were systematically dismantling your political empire. The silence in the room became absolute. The heart monitors beeped steadily, oblivious to the utter destruction of a dynasty. Arthur stared at the papers, his jaw trembling. The realization that his favorite children were not just adulterers, but federal criminals who were actively planning to destroy him, hit him with the force of a massive freight train. Ethan violently shook his head against his pillows. "No, it is a lie. Marcus forged those." That was my cue. I pulled my phone from my pocket, turned the volume all the way up, and pressed play on the audio file Marcus and I had captured right before the lightning struck the cabin. The pristine digital recording filled the room. "Arthur is such a blind, arrogant fool," Vanessa's recorded voice echoed, dripping with venomous amusement. "He actually believes he is going to be mayor. By the time the federal auditors realize the campaign is bankrupt, we will be drinking champagne on a beach in a country that does not honor extradition treaties. He will go to federal prison, and we will be free." Then came Ethan's voice, laughing cruelly. "I cannot wait to leave Claire with the mortgage and the mess. She is so utterly clueless." I stopped the recording and slipped the phone back into my pocket. Arthur clutched the left side of his chest, his face turning an alarming shade of gray as a sharp spike of angina hit him. He stumbled back into a visitor chair, gasping for air. But Arthur Robinson was a survivor of the corporate jungle above all else. He pulled out his phone with trembling hands and immediately dialed his lead attorney, who was waiting in the hallway. "Freeze every single asset tied to Ethan and Vanessa," Arthur commanded into the phone, his voice a breathless, venomous hiss. "Lock them out of the family trust, cancel their corporate equity, cut off their health insurance. I want them removed from this family completely. They are dead to me." He hung up, stood up with massive effort, and walked out of the room without taking a single backward glance at the two pathetic, bandaged figures weeping on the beds. They were officially stripped of their wealth, their power, and their protective shield. They would be facing federal financial prison terms with absolutely nothing to their names. I stepped right up to the edge of Ethan's bed. He looked up at me, his eyes begging for a mercy he never earned. I calmly slid my diamond wedding ring off my finger. I held it over the metal surgical tray resting on his bedside table and let it drop. It hit the stainless steel with a sharp, echoing clink that sounded exactly like a heavy cell door locking shut. "My lawyer filed the divorce papers at dawn," I told him, my voice completely empty of any emotion. "I am taking the house, and I am leaving you with every single cent of your personal debt. Good luck with the burn grafts, Ethan." Within 48 hours, the total collapse of the Robinson empire dominated the front pages of every newspaper in the state. Marcus had anonymously leaked the entire financial folder to his most ruthless journalistic rivals. The mayoral campaign imploded overnight. Arthur was forced to resign from all public boards to face aggressive federal scrutiny. Ethan and Vanessa were transferred to a state-funded public ward, awaiting their impending indictments. But I was not there to witness the fallout. My shift finally ended. I stood in the staff locker room and unbuttoned my white clinical coat, letting the heavy scent of antiseptic and sickness fall away. I slipped on my warm wool coat and pushed through the heavy glass doors of the hospital lobby. The brutal storm from the night before had completely passed. The morning sun was rising over the city skyline, casting a brilliant, blinding light across the rain-washed pavement. I took a deep, freezing breath of the crisp morning air. I walked across the parking lot toward my car, feeling entirely weightless, utterly free, and I knew I would never look back. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. Where are you tuning in from? Please let us know in the comments below. If you found today's story entertaining, please consider helping us with just $1 by scanning the donation QR code on your screen, or by using the donation link in the description or pinned comment. Your support goes directly toward paying our hardworking staff so they can feed their families and continue bringing you more high-quality stories. Thank you again, and have a wonderful day.